Next, we're going to talk about the organ section of the Moog Opus 3. Now, it's interesting. It's an interesting architecture. I've seen this same architecture in one other synthesizer, that is the Korg Delta. Also has an assembly such as this in order to generate organ. I don't know. If we're talking about like a Hammond organ, obviously each of the sliders on a Hammond organ represents a tone wheel that's spinning at a certain frequency. And basically it's the harmonic series. So you're talking about an additive structure. This is different. You'll notice that it has different footage markings, which are our octaves. And what these represent are not individual harmonics, but actually square waves at different frequencies. When you add square waves at different frequencies together, you get fuller, richer, more complex wave shapes. So that is the thinking with the organ section of this musical instrument. Okay, so let's start. You'll notice that I have 16 all the way up to 10. What does it sound like? Of course, it's going to sound like a square wave. Not very organ-like. However, if you just do this and you have a single square wave going, you can use this tone lever over here to shape that square wave. And when you start removing high frequencies from a square wave, what do you get? You start to get a sine wave. It's somewhat quiet, but you could turn it up. It's not quite a sine wave, but it'll do a sine wave. Anyway, we'll talk more about the tone here in a second. But what we really want to do is start adding other octaves of square wave. Right away, the minute you start adding another square wave at another octave, you get another waveform. And the more of these you add, the more organ-like it sounds. That doesn't sound very organ-like. It sounds more synthesizer-y, but that's good. Theoretically, you could think of this as one giant, a wide range square wave octave. I was originally going to jokingly start this demonstration off and say that, yeah, these are switches, and this is only a square wave, and then you switch it to different octaves by turning up different sliders. Like, okay, here's this one. Here's the next one. Here's the next one. Here's the next one. Okay, that would have been hilariously funny, right? Like, yeah, okay. Anyway, so, but mixing, you're going to get really interesting outcomes that are more organ-like at some point. You can do sort of the full ranks by turning them all up. But yeah, moving them around, and you can sort of change the octave of the sound that you have by dropping out different frequencies. Like if we want it to be a higher note, we can take out this lowest square. So you can adjust what octave it is by which sliders you have up. But really the best thing to do is to mix and match the sliders to create new timbres. And let's not forget that we can also shape the wave shapes we've created by these different square wave settings with the tone. But, you know, this is, I'm imagining, just a 6 decibel per octave tone knob, essentially. And so you get really sort of, I'm not sure what you would ever, I guess you could use this. Now, what I would really like to have happen, and, you know, if again I was going to modify this synthesizer, which I'm opposed to, I think synthesizers should be what they are, but there's a part of me that really would love to hear individual envelopes for each of these sliders that you could set independently, or even independent LFOs for each of them, because when you mess with them, it sounds really cool. You see what I mean? Like if you had a different, you know, I wish this also had a hold button so that like you could get a chord going and then you could really mess with. So this doesn't sound like, it's not a Hammond type organ at all. But it is something that in a mix will sound like an organ, and you can get a variety of different organ sounds. And if you really wanted to be obnoxious, you could make it really sort of, and you could add modulation. We'll get to modulation eventually. But yeah, and you can make like a combo organ sound. But yeah, so it is it's a useful section, and it's a lot of fun to mess around and come up with interesting sounds with this architecture. And like the strings, it kind of doesn't quite bring you to true organ territory. There isn't really an organ trail to it. Oh man, I should have never said that. That was terrible. Anyway, but it is an interesting synthesizer functionality. And you're capable of mixing it with the other sections, which we'll get to. And so you can really shape some interesting sounds with it. So that is the organ section of the Moog Opus 3.